Wow! And it is all over!
What's up, guys? I'm Jeremy with All Day MMA, and these are my UFC 232 fight predictions. Starting out, the main event is going to be a featherweight bout between Chad Mendes and Alexander the Great Volkanovski. Now, Alexander Volkanovski did beat Chad Mendes' teammate Darren Elkins in his most recent fight. However, Darren Elkins is not Chad Mendes. Chad Mendes, in my opinion, when he's at his best, is one of the absolute best fighters in the featherweight division. And in his last fight versus Miles Jury, he ended that fight via TKO in the first round, and in my opinion, he looked great. Chad Mendes was coming off a 2-year suspension, so 2 years away from the cage due to some psoriasis cream or something like that, and he looked great. Like I said, he beat Miles Jury, who's a pretty talented fighter himself, in the first round via TKO. He looked dominant the whole fight, and like I said, when he's at his best, I think he's one of the absolute cream of the crop in the featherweight division. Alexander himself is a great fighter. He's ranked number 10 according to the UFC rankings. Chad Mendes is ranked number 5. Alexander Volkanovski is coming into this fight with an 18-1 record, which is a pretty impressive record, I must say. But he has not faced anywhere near the level of competition as Chad Mendes has, nor has he faced the caliber of an opponent such as a Chad Mendes. So I think he definitely has his work cut out for him, and ultimately, I think it's going to be a little too much for him. I see Chad Mendes winning this fight via convincing unanimous decision after 3 rounds. Now, after that, we're going to move on to a light heavyweight fight between the Swede Ilir Latifi and the American Corey Anderson. Just like the previous fight, Corey Anderson is ranked number 10, Latifi's ranked number 5. I think those rankings are justified in the sense that that is how I see the fight going. I think Latifi should absolutely be the favorite. I think he's looked great lately. Latifi's most recent fight was against Ovin St. Preux, and he finished the fight via guillotine. And OSP is a very tough fighter to submit, so it was a very impressive performance. Corey Anderson himself fought OSP 3 fights ago, I think, and lost the fight. It was a pretty good back and forth fight for sure, but he did lose the fight via head kick knockout, I believe. And he's had 2 fights since then against Patrick Cummins and Glover Teixeira. He won both of them via unanimous decision. His most recent one against Glover Teixeira, I don't really know what to say about that. Glover, in my opinion, looked absolutely horrible. He looked old, he looked slow. It was a dominant performance for Corey Anderson, but definitely wasn't the Glover Teixeira of old back when he was dominant. He definitely looks like a shell of his former self, so in my opinion, it wasn't too impressive of a win. With that said, I do predict this will be a pretty good back and forth battle, and I definitely expect it to go to a decision in which Ilir Latifi will emerge victorious after 3 rounds. Final pick, unanimous decision. Moving on to one of my all-time favorite fighters, which makes this a very, very tough fight to pick. Carlos Condit, the natural born killer, one of my all-time favorites. He was the king of the 170-pound division in the WEC, and he was one of the original fighters that got me into MMA back in the day. So I don't know what to say. He hasn't looked too good lately. He's lost his last 4 fights, one of which was against Robbie Lawler, which he lost a unanimous decision, but in my opinion, he absolutely won that fight. But the 3 fights since then, he lost in pretty convincing fashion to Damian Maia, Neil Magny, and Alex Cowboy Oliveira, in which I thought he looked awful in that fight. It's painful to say that, but I do believe, however, this is a much more winnable fight against Michael Chiesa for him. Michael Chiesa is a 155-pounder that's moving up to 170 pounds. Michael Chiesa himself hasn't really looked too great lately. His last fight, I believe, was the fight that he lost against Anthony Pettis. And like I said, this is going to be his first fight at 170, so it's really tough to say how he's going to look. Like I said, Carlos hasn't looked too great lately, but he is the naturally bigger fighter. So I think this will be a relatively close fight. My heart says Carlos Condit. Unfortunately, my head says Michael Chiesa is going to emerge victorious with a unanimous decision. Moving on to the co-main event, which is a fight a lot of people have probably been looking forward to for a while. You may not find yourself saying that about women's MMA all too often, but when it comes to Cris Cyborg and Amanda Nunes, it's pretty much guaranteed fireworks. And in my opinion, that's exactly what it's going to be while it lasts. I don't think it's going to go to a decision. I think Cris Cyborg is going to put a pace on Amanda Nunes that Amanda Nunes can't handle. Amanda Nunes hasn't been known for the best cardio in the world, and I believe the reason she won the 2 fights against Valentina Shevchenko is because Valentina sat back and waited to counter too much. She didn't put the pressure on Amanda Nunes. She didn't attack Amanda Nunes' gas tank, and I think Cyborg will. I think the first 2 rounds will be competitive, and eventually I think Cyborg's pace is going to be too much. I think Amanda Nunes is going to run out of gas, and I think Cris Cyborg will finish her via TKO in the 4th round. After that fight is the fight that I know everybody's been looking forward to, because the original fight between Jon Bones Jones and Alexander Gustafsson was one of, in my opinion, the greatest fights of all time. I used to think Alexander should have got the nod in that fight. I've watched it countless times since then, and it's still kind of hard to pick a winner. But I have a pretty good idea of who's going to win this fight. Now, neither fighter has fought very much recently. Jon Bones Jones, for obvious reasons. He's been suspended the majority of the past 2 years or so. Alexander Gustafsson, whether it's injuries or whatever the case may be, he hasn't fought much lately either. And his last fight was against Glover Teixeira, who I mentioned not too long ago when I was talking about Corey Anderson, hasn't exactly looked great lately. Alexander did look impressive in that fight. He won via knockout in the 5th round, but like I said, Glover is not the Glover of a couple years ago, so I don't really consider a victory over him too impressive. So I'm not really sure what Alexander Gustafsson we will see at UFC 232. I can say the exact same thing about Jon Bones Jones. There's been a lot of steroid accusations for obvious reasons. He looked great in the 2nd fight against Daniel Cormier when he knocked him out, or TKO'd him with the head kick and follow-up punches. But who knows what Jon Bones Jones is going to show up. We don't know if he's possibly been using performance-enhancing drugs the majority of his career. And lots of rumors are the only fight he was clean in recently was his fight against OSP, in which he didn't look like the Jon Bones Jones that we're accustomed to seeing. But something tells me he's going to show up and he's going to look good. And Alexander Gustafsson, like I just said, hasn't exactly been too active lately either. So I think maybe ring rust will be a little bit of a problem for both of them. But at the end of the day, I think Jon Jones is the more talented fighter. I think he will rise to the occasion. I think he's going to be determined to get his belt back. And I think ultimately he will win the fight via another unanimous decision after 5 rounds. Now, I am fairly confident that he will win the fight by decision, but I'm not too confident that he won't pop or fail some sort of drug test after the fight. So hopefully that doesn't happen, because I really, like I'm sure a lot of you guys out there, want to see the 3rd fight between him and DC before DC calls it a career. And I'm really hoping that fight happens at heavyweight, because personally, I think DC looks a heck of a lot better at heavyweight than he does at light heavyweight. So I'm hoping that's the final fight of DC's career. And in order for that to happen, I believe Jon Jones needs to win this fight. Anyways, those are my fight predictions for UFC 232. Let me know what you guys think below. Let me know if you think I'm right on the money, or maybe you think I'm way off. Either way, let me know what you guys think, and enjoy the fights. Enjoy the holidays, and I'll see you in the next video.
Oh my goodness! Oh my God! Just like that! That is some serious power! Wow! And it